Hi, back in session with Professor P, Chapter 8, Food Production and the Rise of States. You guys all like to talk about food. I know you guys love food. All right, we're starting out with the Neolithic Revolution. Neolithic Revolution happens 10,000 years ago. We switch from hunting and gathering and doing all that stuff just by getting natural resources to now doing agricultural development. Manipulating the environment is with the Neolithic. We switch to food production, right? That becomes quite important. Food production is really the cultivation and domestication of plants and animals. You guys can follow along with your concept sheets because I'm going straight from there. Sedentarism is actually being settled down. It's when we start to actually live in community and we stop hunting and gathering, okay? That becomes important. Agriculture refers to all the types of domestication of plant cultivation. All right, let's get to Pleistocene megafauna. Remember those big animals we talked about? Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths, giant horses, giant deers. They all become extinct. That could be one reason why we needed to start producing food. We don't know, right? All right, Pleistocene megafauna becomes completely extinct at this point. Let's start with the Near East. What was going on? Near East, we're talking about Turkey. They start talking about the utilization of broad spectrum collecting. That means we're collecting all kinds of food resources with an increase of also stationary foods, okay? So we start to rely on stationary foods like grains, things like that. We're having storage pits. We're doing a lot of good stuff. One of the things they talk about is why did we start to do that? There could have been climate change. Humans, we could have been overkilling Pleistocene megafauna. They talk about we're always doing something, right? Population growth could have been happening. We could have had a decreasing in different kinds of game, not just the big animal game. So there's lots of speculation as to why we turn to sort of broad spectrum collecting. All right, let's move on to Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is just all of like Mexico, Central America, South America, things like that. Pleistocene megafauna extinct, changes in the environment happening, same type of stuff. We also talk about sedentarism. Being sedentary and being settled down is related directly to population growth. Population growth means that once we become settled down, we start to increase. We start to have more children. When we were hunting and gathering, a lot of students don't make the connection, but when we're hunting and gathering, we had a small amount of body fat. So it was like a regulated birth control. It was sort of like automatic, like as a hunting gatherer. As we start to settle down and increase in fats, we start to actually increase our production, our child production, right? We start to reproduce more. We start to have more children. More children were needed for agricultural development. There's a lot going down with that sort of connection there, which is important. All right, Neolithic basically means New Stone Age. Coming about 10,000 years ago, humans started to do a lot of stuff, domestication, plant of animals, plant cultivation. One of the things that we talk about with domestication is we're really talking about there's a difference between like wild variety and then now cultivated variety, right? And wild grains. All right, let's go on with the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent was an area of sort of land in between like Israel. It went to the Jordan Valley. It went through Turkey and it went through Iran. It was some of the earliest centers of domestication and plant and animal cultivation. Okay, that becomes important. They were domesticating like oat and barley and peas and rye, a variety of different fruits, pigs and goats and all this good stuff. Ali Kosh was in southwestern Iran. And basically what they were known for was the two biggest innovations that we even use today, irrigation and the use of domesticated cattle. We have both of those today in this world. That was hugely important, all right, with Ali Kosh. Mesoamerica, which I talked to you guys about. Mesoamerica was very important. All of Mexico, Central America, South America, all those areas. Domestication in Mesoamerica was really important. One of the things that was really interesting is they didn't really have to end up doing the Neolithic Revolution and domestication agriculture. But what they started to do was both. So they started to actually still hunt and gather, and they were doing agricultural development. One of the first things they developed was called the bottle gourd. The bottle gourd was quite interesting because the bottle gourd was an actual gourd. You could get it during like harvest time. You can get it at Trader Joe's even today. And basically they didn't eat it. They used it as a water, like it was the old hydro flask, the bottle gourd. So you used it as carrying, and once they went bad, you could throw it on the ground, pick up another one. So they really used it as a carrying container. Another thing was teosinte. Teosinte was archaic maize or archaic corn, okay? It was about an inch long with spikes on it. We couldn't eat that, right? So then maize comes about where we start to cultivate and we start to have, I know you guys think corn came from Brentwood, California, but really it didn't. It came from Mesoamerica and it was maize. So they had to cultivate it into where they have the cobs and then they could eat it without the spikes. So that becomes really important for Mesoamerica. But teosinte was the archaic form of it. South America, right? We talk about what's going on in South America, places like Peru. We have potatoes, lima beans, chili peppers. Chili peppers have not changed today. So if you go to the part in the grocery store, you see the yellow ones and the red ones and the green chili peppers. They actually haven't been modified since historically, so that becomes important. North America, us, what comes out of us? Sunflower, goosefoot, sumpweed, dogs we started to actually domesticate, turkey, things like that. Why did food production develop? There were a lot of theories. One was climate change, we had to do it. Another one was that we had to have the knowledge to actually, and the cognitive knowledge to actually do it. Another one was population growth on a local level and then on a global scale. We also had climate change in different areas. So it wasn't just the local climate change, but it was also global climate change. So lots of things were happening, right, to spawn our food production and accelerate it, right? So there was a lot of consequences with that too. Settling down, increased population growth, also a decline in health. They talk about that greater malnutrition happens when we have an overdependency on a few crops. So lots of different things were happening at the time. All right, let's get to a chiefdom. A chiefdom basically where it has a chief at its head and it can incorporate multiple communities. So that becomes very important to understand when we talk about a chiefdom. Mesopotamia was one of the first areas to actually analyze, right, and analyze this sort of Neolithic revolution. And they had a chiefdom. Mesopotamia was all of like the Middle East. And they talk about Middle East, Iran, Iraq, all these different areas. And in Uruk, which was southwestern Iran, there was a lot of stuff going on. You guys see commodity sealing, message sealing in the boule. That was the first post office. That's what was cool. Commodity sealing was used to keep track of goods, tightly closed it until it reached its destination. Message sealing was just keeping track of goods received and gone. And the boule was a clay container that you actually kept the goods in. So it was really the first post office in a way. Sumer and the Sumerian civilization had a very formative period. There were temples, there were religious organizations, they had a government, they had codified laws, they had a chiefdom, they had pottery and jewelry making. There was social classes, so there was a difference in nobility and slavery. They also had one of the first writing systems called cuneiform. And let me see, so cuneiform, if you see, you probably can't see well, if you could look it up, cuneiform was sort of dots and lines. It was quite different than hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics came out of Egypt, and hieroglyphics were more pictorial. So it would have like pictures, and it was very artistic. I want you to go and look up the difference between cuneiform and hieroglyphics. Just look at the pictures of it. But like I said, cuneiform was lines and dots. Hieroglyphics was more pictorial, very colorful and things like that. All right. Mesopotamia and Teotihuacan. Mesopotamia is, like I told you, all of sort of Latin America, Mexico, places like that. And in Mesopotamia and Teotihuacan, they had one of the first mappings. Mappings were like what we do here, like grids, streets, residential area, pyramid area, ball courts. It was the planning out of people and where they were going to reside, street grids, things like that. Really interesting. There was architectural style as well. Monte Alban was in the valley of Oaxaca, and what happened there in southwestern Mexico was there was no grid. Nobody really knew about it a lot, but this is where it was a neutral, non-productive area where city officials and government leaders and officials would meet because it was a non-important place and it was sort of a neutral place. So people couldn't really fight and battle there. But Monte Alban was that meeting place. What were theories for the origin of the state? And there were a lot of theories for the origin of the state. Population growth. Okay, was one of them. Warfare. We needed to actually put people in a place captors to put them in a place. It was also associated with the irrigation system. People who controlled food had the origin of the state there. So there's lots of things, and they go over it in your book as well. But lots of things happened when we started to produce food. As you can see, we started to have, cities and developments and mapping people who are in charge of the food. Even today, we look at the high cost of food today, can cause malnutrition, right? People control the system. So we have to think about that. All right. I hope you liked Food Production and the Rise of States. Go have a good meal. See you later. Professor P is leaving now.